Yo everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing another video from my series called Bakwas Life, which means nonsense life for those of you who don't necessarily speak a language from the South Asian community. In today's video we are going to talk specifically about divorce, and in particular the way that divorce impacts women as opposed to men. Now unfortunately, when it comes to the South Asian community, and I'm sure it applies to many other communities as well, for example the Arab community, there is this massive stigma attached to divorce, and it always seems to be more geared towards women in terms of if a woman is divorced, there must be something wrong with her. If she's divorced, she's now considered second-hand goods. If she's divorced, nobody else will want to marry her. And because of some of these reasons that I've listed, as a result of that, a lot of women end up staying in very, very unhappy marriages up until the day that they pretty much die. And it's really wrong, it's very unfair, and there should not be the stigma attached to divorce, especially in regards to women. At the end of the day, marriage is a two-way street, and if there is an issue in the marriage, why should it necessarily be the woman's fault? And even when it is the man's fault, yet somehow it's still the woman's fault. Now, not long ago, I asked my Instagram followers to give me what their views were, and I promised obviously to be completely anonymous, because I know that there are lots of South Asian women out there that have gone through divorce or are considering divorce but won't. And they want somebody to speak up on their behalf to let them know that, you know what, it's not just me that's going through this, it's so many other women as well. So I'm just going to read some to you guys. So one person has said there is a huge stigma around it, which leads to people staying in unhappy marriages or being ostracized from their community for having the guts to put themselves first. Somebody else said, I was married for 16 years. The last 12 years I was in an unhappy state. And last year, mashallah, I managed to get my divorce. So happy for you. Another person, I would never be able to tell my family I'm divorced as I'm South Asian and I would feel that they would shun me. Somebody else said there are double standards for divorce as women are considered the ones at fault, like I already said. Somebody else said, why do women get the blame for divorce? Someone said some Pakistanis are in toxic marriages and cheat but won't divorce because of the stigma attached to it. Somebody else said every auntie and uncle has an opinion on divorce until it's their child, then there's silence. Divorce still has a lot of stigma and shame, which drains people from living their best life. Somebody else said, I'm divorced with 2 kids. I was shunned from the community but did my own thing and remarried anyway. Which the ex-in-laws reported as a sham marriage and tried to have my then fiance beaten. Alhamdulillah, I'm happy now. My community tried to involve me in things. If you can't be at my side at my worst, you as hell don't deserve to be at my side at my happiest. Somebody else said I was a divorcee at one time, and it's shocking how the guy is looked at and treated and how the woman is looked at and treated. Even before we got divorced, automatically people and family assumed it's because of me. Because I've met someone after my divorce, I was shocked at how many people's attitudes changed towards me. Like I was a slut, like I was a disease. Even my own friends and family. He got married within a year, treated like absolute royalty. Whereas I got looked down upon, talked about, as if I shouldn't even exist. I remarried eventually, but my in-laws keep my previous marriage a secret from everyone till this day. Don't ask why, it's a shame. Why our so-called society treat us women like this when it comes to being divorced. I fell into depression because of all of this, lost so much weight, lost the will to live. It's like you're not even allowed to live anymore or move on, nothing. And the funny thing is, initially, guys want to get to know you and all that. The moment you tell them you're divorced, they vanish. I guess we're not as good enough to take home to mummy. That's really sad. But I'm happy she's obviously remarried and clearly in a much happier place. And then one more story, which is a little bit long. And again, I promised to keep this completely anonymous, as I've promised all my followers I would do. I was a divorcee, currently remarried with 2 more children. It was tough. There were so many stigmas around who will marry a divorcee or what will people think. Luckily, my family was supportive, even though those did get mentioned and I was able to go through the divorce. I think it happened quicker for me as my previous partner only married me for legal citizenship within this country. That's evil. I was very young at the time, 18. Oh my God. It was an arranged marriage. I went ahead with it. Till this day, I don't even know why. I also had social services on my back as I had a child and was a victim of domestic violence. Even though it wasn't as bad as most of the stories you hear, it was still on record and I had to get a court order against him just in case he did turn up out of the blue. I think the court order was more precaution and advice I took from the police and social services. He also threatened to take my child away from me, which was more of a reason why I went ahead with the court order. This is actually really upsetting to hear. I was not pressured into remarrying again, but I did get told by my own mum when she'd be pissed with me Who'd want to marry me again with a kid, blah, blah, blah. But it didn't really bother me as I didn't care. After a few years, I re-met someone I already knew from the past and was good friends with, and then it led to marriage. My family were fine with it. However, from the other side, as he was also a divorcee too, I felt as if they were ashamed. They didn't have to say it directly, but it's the way that they behaved. It felt as though I was the dirty secret. By that, I mean, you know, when some men get married twice and the second wife and kids are kept secret, that's how I personally felt. I only met the immediate family. Usually when you get married, especially in the South Asian community, the mother-in-law shows off her daughter-in-law to the world. I remember one time we went to a wedding and I didn't get introduced to anyone. As relations are much better, especially after having my first child with my second partner. As soon as I had that child, I got called non-stop from my mother-in-law. I ignored it most of the time, and later I told her I ignored it on purpose, lol. And then she goes on to say that there was more to the story because of her previous partner and her child from her first marriage and the issues that she had, etc., etc. But this just goes to show that the stigma around a divorce is absolutely disgusting when it comes to women within the South Asian community. The misogyny is absolutely massive. And the misogyny runs deep, not just through men, but through women as well. What a lot of people don't seem to realize is that women can be misogynist as well. They've been brainwashed since they were young age. They must have sons. Their sons must do X and their girls must do Y, because that is what they have had to do themselves. From my point of view, a lot of the time, and I know South Asians hate to talk about it because it's very hush 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 hush, generally it's all down to do with sex. And I know people don't want to hear that, but that's exactly what it is. It's all to do with sex. South Asian community are very, very sexually repressed. And when it comes to a woman in particular that is divorced, the reason why she's considered second-hand goods and why people are ashamed is down to sex. It's because, well, she's been married, so we know she's had sex. She's not a virgin anymore. She's not pure anymore. She's not chaste anymore. But when it comes to a man, it's no big deal. He can get married as many times as he wants and it's not a big deal, because whether or not he slept with loads of women or none at all, it makes no difference because it's not something visible, if that makes sense. And when I talk about visible, it's this stupid myth that people have. Men have this, even in this modern day, and women, unfortunately, that when you have sex for the first time, you bleed. That's not true. Especially if you were a child, and I can speak that on behalf of myself. If you were a very, very active child involved in sports, running, gymnastics, all over the place, that tiny little piece of skin called the hymen will break. It's a thin membrane piece of skin. Now, when it comes to South Asians and their wedding night, men are almost expected or have been told, if there is no blood there, it means your wife is not a virgin, which means she's used, which means another man has touched her. Even though the fact is that a lot of women do not bleed because of the reasons why I've already given. Whereas with a man, there is no way to physically tell whether he has slept with loads of women or none. A woman is literally reduced to nothing other than a piece of skin. Deflowering a girl, which I think is actually a really disgusting term, taking her flower, taking her virginity, taking her cherry. Whoever came up with this bullshit, it was probably a guy. This is a practice that has been going on for centuries. For centuries, especially, for example, in the Arab culture, when a young girl is married. I don't know if it's a practice that still goes on, but I know in the past it definitely has done, is that on the wedding night the man is expected to produce the bedcloths which are covered in blood in order to prove that his wife was a virgin. It's actually considered like something to be proud of. And if there is no blood, God help her, she will be called a whore, she will be called a tramp, and in some cases she will be thrown out the house. So not only has now this woman lost her virginity to her husband, she's now also not worthy of even staying as a wife. So technically, she's not even a virgin anymore, despite the fact that she was to begin with. There are so many people out there that regard women that are divorced as second-hand goods. And I'm sorry I keep using that term, but I have to use sometimes harsh words to let it sink into people's heads. Someone who has never been married before will always be preferred over somebody who has. What exactly is the difference between the two? Somebody who's never been married before could be an absolutely awful individual, could be a horrible, nasty, spiteful person, but in the mind of the man, she's a virgin, or she's never been touched, or so they assume. So basically the difference between the two is sex, or the act of sex, or the act of having sex. It's the assumption that the one who has never been married before has ever done it before, whereas we know if a woman is divorced, she has had sex with her husband. It's this whole patriarchal mindset of dominance over a woman's body. Basically, as a husband, I'm the only one who's ever touched her. No one's ever touched her before. She's a pure, clean, virginal angel. Whereas a divorced woman is used, dirty, and has had sex with loads of people, and I don't want to touch her. Even though the men themselves have had sex with so many women that they've actually lost count. The hypocrisy is a joke. Why does a woman not deserve a same kind of husband as her? Why is she not afforded the same kind of equal rights as a man that is divorced? Because at the end of the day, when it comes to the South Asian community, a man's stature and class is down to how much money he makes. Whereas a woman is reduced to nothing but her body. If a woman wants to get divorced, it's considered a massive, massive shame for her, not for him. She bears the burden of the expectations of her Asian or traditionally Asian family, to be a good Asian housewife that cooks, cleans, breeds, not really being given the chance to aspire to do anything else with her life in terms of education or a career, but to stay at home. She has food in her belly. She has clothes on her back. She should be happy and grateful to her husband for being able to provide for her. How dare she ask for a divorce? She has everything. Because of that, so many women out there will stay unhappy, unfulfilled, and that kind of vibe unfortunately also passes down to their children, and it will pass down to the son, and it will pass down to the daughter, and then the vicious cycle continues. Because I don't think a lot of people realize this when they try and keep things from their kids. Kids always pay attention, they're always listening, they're always learning, and if they see learned behavior from their parents, they will then either go and act it out themselves at some point, or they will go in the complete opposite direction and say, I don't ever want to get married because this is what is probably going to happen to me. If a woman does manage to finally get divorced, she's not allowed to talk about it. It's all very hush hush, shush shush, don't ever bring it up. It's a shame, sharam kar, and it remains hidden like some dirty secret, rather than something to be proud of, that you actually left a relationship that you weren't happy with. The woman's family will then be expected to go and find another husband for her ASAP. Doesn't matter who it is. It could be the worst kind of person ever, but she must have that association of being a wife rather than a divorcee. Don't get me wrong, men go through this as well, but for a woman it's so much worse. I know myself people or women that have been divorced, and even though their new husbands are all right with it, their in-laws are like, don't mention that you were ever divorced. Don't mention that you're my son's second wife. If anyone ever asks, you've never been married to anybody else, you're his first wife, let's not even talk about it. And it's so true what that other person said, that as soon as family functions and that happen, and people will know that, you know, you've married somebody else, because that's not the same man you brought to the wedding last time, or that's not the same guy you brought to a family function last time, or they came to your wedding. Let's not talk about it. Hush, hush, hush. Push the new wife to the side. She's a second wife. She's invisible. She's just there. Can you imagine how that will make a woman feel? But for a guy, it's completely fine. I know guys that have been divorced once, twice, 3 times. Some of them are on their 4th marriages, and it's no big deal. It's like, well done, you found a wife, you know. But if it was a woman, oh my God, whore, tramp, loose, you know, all kinds of nasty, misogynistic, derogatory terms will be used to humiliate her as if she doesn't deserve any kind of happiness. But it's not the same for a man. The stigma attached to divorce is absolutely ridiculous, and that goes for all religions within the South Asian community and all cultures as well. It's wrong. At the end of the day, if a couple are not working out for whatever reason, they need to part ways, not just for their own mental health and their own well-being, but for their children's sake as well. A lot of the time, children are a lot happier because even though their parents are divorced, but they're not living in that toxic kind of environment anymore. And sometimes parents actually parent better when they are no longer together as a couple. I also find it absolutely hilarious when it comes to men that have been divorced, but they refuse to marry a divorced woman themselves. And I'm like, a bit of a hypocrite, no. Again, it comes down to sex. So they have been married before, the man. He's had sex with his wife in the past, obviously. They're now divorced, but now he wants somebody else who's pure and virginal. The hypocrisy attached to it. It's because you want somebody untouched. Well, doesn't the woman deserve the same? Does a woman not deserve a man who's also untouched? I mean, that's what I mean with the double standards. So it's all right for men to behave in a certain way, but women are not allowed to do that. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to the South Asian society, I mean, a lot of things have definitely changed in the past 50 to 100 years, but unfortunately in the background, these kind of mindsets do still exist. So let me know what you guys' thoughts are in regards to divorce within the South Asian community, or even in your communities, if it sounds anything similar to what I've described. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, your views are. If you're a man, I'm really not interested in what your views are, especially if you're going to behave in the exact way that I have already described. On this channel, we're here for positivity, we're here for uplifting, we're here to support each other. We're not here to hear your misogynistic, patriarchal, brainwashed views. No one here cares. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, make sure you subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.